Hello everyone. Today I'm going to discuss Forestry Paper 1 of Indian Forest Service Mains Examination of 2021. Okay, the examination happened on 5th of March and I'm going to discuss today section 1 of paper 1 and section 2, section B we'll be discussing subsequently. Okay, this is section A. So as you know, there are 8 questions in optional paper, out of which 2 are compulsory, question 1 and question 5. And from rest of the 6 questions, you have to choose 3 and at least 1 must be chosen from uh, each section. So basically today I'm going to discuss first 4 questions out of the 8, and out of that at least 2 or maximum 3 were to be attempted. This section involves most important topics for forestry like silviculture and silviculture system. So this section actually forms bulk of the syllabus for forestry optional, because silviculture is such a crux for this optional that one can say that 50% of your syllabus is just silviculture, although it is in this section alone. Further, this optional being a technical topic, section B has some general topic, but if you want to get good marks, you should attempt more questions from this section. This is what one of the suggestions uh, given by I think one of last year's topper, and I have followed it. So let's see how it goes. But yes, this section is very important. It has very important topics like silviculture. So first question, of course, there are 5 sub questions, and this is compulsory. Each question has to be attempted. Each question is 8 marker, and 2 pages are provided for writing this answer. So basically, since you have to attempt total 5 questions, so you have 36 minutes for each question, and here 5 question, 36 minutes. So around 7 minutes or a little bit more than that is what you have for each question of 8 marks. But 7 minutes is what you have in general. And these questions generally are easy, and if you know it, you can directly write. Further, forestry optional had changed ever since the pattern had changed from 2013 examination. Before 2013, only those having forestry background used to attempt this examination. So questions were very specific and difficult. But since the prelim became common, it eventually only those who have very good marks in prelim could write the main. So they were people from many different backgrounds and not specifically forestry background. So papers these days are comparatively much easier when we compare with papers before 2013, because they tried initially after 2013 to give similar kinds of paper, but people just couldn't write it because they didn't have the forestry background. So now we have very easy paper. So this is one of the most common optionals, as you must know, and almost 70% people, I would say, choose this as an option. Okay, so let's come to first question. Why is it difficult to carry out forestation programs in cold deserts? See, in forestry optional, I think we can just introduce by defining something. It's very safe, it's very good way as well, because this is a technical subject. So just defining things in at the outset is always a good way to begin, in my opinion. So in introduction, you can say what are these cold deserts and where do they occur in India? That is one thing. So you can draw the map here, or you can write the regions as well. Okay, so what are these cold deserts? So these are arid areas having extremely cold temperatures or winters as well, and low precipitation. That's why they are arid. These are found in generally in plateaus or mountainous areas in temperate regions of the world. In India, you can say that they are found in, so yes, Ladakh. Then you have Kinnaur region of Himachal. Then you have Lahaul and Spiti, and parts of Sikkim. So these are the regions where you have cold deserts in India that you can mention in the map, or just like that in the introduction. Okay, so coming to main part, since this is an 8 marker, you don't have a lot of time to beat around the bush, or you don't need to as well. Just come right to it. Why is it difficult? Because there are a lot of adverse factor at work here. So what are these adverse factors? That's the thing you have to really mention. So what are climatic adverse factors? So high insolation there is there because the atmosphere is rarefied. So there's no the sunlight coming. So it is directly reaching there because the atmosphere is rarefied. You have low rainfall and low moisture, low temperature. It inhibits water absorption by plants. So these are climatic factors. See, in forestry questions, there are 4 fundamental factors that are always at play. These are climatic, edaphic, that means soil related, topographic, and biotic. So these 4 factors, or 4F as we call them, they will always be at work, and then there would be some other factors as well, as and when situation arises. So edaphic factors, what will be edaphic? Soil related factors. So soil is shallow, stony, which holds poor moisture. Yes, there is low organic matter, there is no leaching, so there is accumulation of salts. Very direct questions, very simple questions. You don't have a lot of time to think. So you just have 7 minutes. Just explain the things. There's no complications like in civil services, like explain, elucidate, comment, nothing. You just have to you just have to directly answer, right? So fertility is low, then accumulation of salt. So there are this salt pans that get formed. Then you have landslides, so soil erosion is issue. Topography is rugged and undulating topography is there. Biotic, heavy grazing pressure is there. So whatever is grown, seedlings are established, uh, animals just come and eat it. And comparatively, in India, there's a peculiar problem that even in deserts, our deserts are also overpopulated when we compare it to similarly placed areas around the world. So our Thar desert is much more populated than other hot deserts like Sahara, or our cold desert is also has more population compared to other regions. So this problem is also there, grazing and browsing pressure. Then other problems like funding, such kind of afforestation programs need persistent funding. That is an issue. Labor availability in arid regions, so Ladakh, etc., have lower population, so labor availability is another issue. And in conclusion, you can give some futuristic conclusion, like still some species that are hardy enough do exist, and you can mention that, like sea buckthorn or Felix alba. You can mention these hardy species that are used for afforestation. But yeah, using scientific names will always give you edge over other people. So here R should not be capital. I'm sorry for that. It should be small, because in forestry, writing scientific names is important. So you have to write it in the right way as well. So when we are typing it, we write it in italics. So Hiphophy Ramnede. But when you are writing on the paper, you have to write it like you have to write it like this, and you have to underline. That's how you write scientific names. You have to ensure that you're writing as many scientific names as possible. Generally avoid writing common names because everybody writes them. So this will give you edge, and tell your examiner that this person has studied forestry in detail, and not just appearing it just like that. Okay, let's go to next question. What are the factors that are considered important for choosing species under avenue plantation? Again, a direct question. No hidden demand. You just have to write important factors for avenue plantation. And for that, you need to know what avenue plantation is, and that is your introduction right there. Okay. So you just have to write that avenue plantation is basically roadside plantation, highway side plantation. That is called as avenue plantation or pathways. So plantation around that is avenue plantation. That's the only thing you have to mention. Then in next paragraph, like connecting paragraph, you can mention that it is why it is practiced. So for aesthetic value, shade purposes, controlling soil erosion, economic use. So some good timber can be used, which is revenue for the government or the contractor who is planting those plants. These are the reasons. So protection from the heat of the roads, because roads generally expand during summers. So to protect that, plants are helpful. Avenue plantation is helpful. So what could be factors? I mean, you can think about them rationally as well, but these are the important factors. Like you want the species to be fast growing, evergreen, so a lot of litter shouldn't come on roads, etc., because it may lead to accidents because cars may slip. Then you want straight bowl, you don't want side branches because they may come in inside the roads and may hinder vehicles which have higher height, or they may break and fall on the vehicles. So you want straight bowls, no side branches. Tree alignment should be right, and it should consider that electric lines and telephone wires, etc., they are not harmed in the future as well. That has to also be considered. So future widening of roads should be taken into account. That should be also. So these are the factors, like wind farm species should be there, because otherwise during strong winds or cyclones they may fall on the road and it may lead to accidents, etc. And it should not attract wildlife. That should be also be there, because then accident might happen, wildlife and car accidents, wildlife may get harmed or damaged. Okay, and in conclusion you can write some species like eucalyptus, they suit this better. Again, a direct question, nothing really to explain here. I just wanted to enlist the factors. These factors, you can think about them rationally. You can get them in any book. Okay, next question. An appropriate silviculture system promotes better regeneration of forest stand. Okay, so you have to comment this. But see here, you don't really, in general, comment in comment question, you can take a side and then comment on it. But here, I mean, you can only take one side, in my opinion, because it really matters which system you use about for better regeneration of forest. So in introduction, you can either define silviculture system or you can define regeneration. Since this question is more about regeneration, I have defined here regeneration of forest. Regeneration is basically replacing old trees or crops with new, naturally or artificially. Simple definition, no need of complication. This is just a 8-marker question. You just have to write it quickly in 7 minutes and move ahead. So again, these connecting statements I have added because regeneration depends on multiple factors, so which can be controlled, managed or enhanced by appropriate choice of silvicultural system. And what are these factors and how correct system aids the regeneration? That's I have explained through examples. So if the species is light demander, you choose clear felling system, so it will go better growth. If we choose shelter wood system, then there is higher chance of shelter wood provides protection from frost, winds, etc., strong sunlight. So there is higher chance of survival of young seedlings. If species is good copicer, then you choose copicing systems. If it is good seed producing system, you choose high forest systems. And on the other hand, you can say that choice of wrong system may lead to poor regeneration or destroyed regeneration as well. So you can give examples of that as well. So you cannot use clear felling on hill slopes because on the bare surfaces then nothing grows, because it's just not possible for anything to grow on those bare rocky slopes. See, that's what I mentioned. And conclusion, it's a general conclusion. Forester has to be cognizant about which system to be used in terms of regeneration, because substantial impact is there on forest stand. Okay. Let me move to question number 4. Are non-native species an option or threat to forest ecosystems or plantation under climate change? So this, in general, also they can not ask climate change. Still, the question still holds, but they are asking about plantation under climate change. So you should be writing some specific points, or at least mention the climate change in the answer, and not write in general about non-native species or exotic species. Okay. So what would be the introduction? Introduction simply will be definition of non-native tree species. They are grown outside their limits of their natural range. Okay, simple. Now there are two things. Is that an option or is it a threat? See, in these kinds of question, it won't be black or white. Okay, it would be both. And you give some points about yes, it can be an option, but at the same time, it has its limitation and it can become threat. So your conclusion would be, see, it's an option and we need to use all tools available to us to really tackle climate change. So we have to use these non-native species wherever applicable and wherever it gives benefits, but we have to be cognizant about harmful effects, and they must be used, right species must be used, and there should be proper analysis before introducing them in our forest ecosystems. Okay, that's what I have written. Why are they option? Because they give much wider field of choice for us to choose. Like if you are only restricted to yes, use these species only, native species only. So there are very few species which may uh, sequester a lot of carbon. But if you can choose any species in the world. There may be species that sequester 5 times, 7 times more carbon than native species. So if we have choice to, if we can choose that, so it may lead to better dealing with climate change. Again, so R&D. So as you know, tree breeding and R&D takes huge amount of times. It takes decades even to really know the impact of breeding programs that we are holding. But if R&D is already done in for some other countries, we can use that R&D for our benefits and not wait too long, because the climate change is a current emergency, not the future one. Then other benefits are there of non-native species. So pest attacks outside its habitat doesn't happen at least for few rotations. Then it grows fast and productivity is higher because there is no pest attacks. Local pests don't know that species, so pest attacks initially don't happen, but they have their limitations. So what are those limitations? So acclimatization takes time. They may not survive. They may not produce viable seeds for few rotations as well. So they can become susceptible to pest attacks after a few rotations. So when our local pest gets to know this tree, then it becomes susceptible. And yes, the second part, they can even become threats. So you can give example like this gajar grass or any invasive species. You can give example. It can become invasive as there is no pest to control its population. Okay, but in conclusion, as I said, climate change needs all hands on deck approach, and we have to use all tools at our disposal. So we must be careful which species to choose, and it can be an option, but we have to ensure that it doesn't become threat. So the right choice of species is the way to go. That's what my conclusion would be. Okay. Okay. Next question. Do the tree of same species have different response to light conditions at different ages? See, this is one of those questions where if you have a lot of examples with you, then only you can write really effective answer, because in general the answer is yes. Yes, it happens, but to really convince the examiner that yes, you need to know the examples. So I have mentioned few examples. So if you know them, great. But if you don't know, write whatever you know. This is an 8 marker. Don't waste a lot of time, is what I would say. Instead, there are 15 markers which are direct questions, and where you can write lot of things, and there is lot of space provided there. So sometimes 4 pages are provided for 15 markers, and you can get really, really high marks like 12, 13, 14 marks even you can get there, instead of wasting a lot of time on this 8 marker if you don't know a lot of examples, because question is about examples. So I mentioned few. So do they have? Yes, indeed, that's the answer really. So few examples. So Santalum album, initially it is a shade demander species, but later it can tolerate light overhead, but overall it is a shade bearer species. Again, Tectona grandis or teak, as I said, use scientific names wherever possible, wherever you can. You can write common name in brackets, but as much as you can write scientific names. Tectona grandis. So, okay, sorry, this is not frost sensitive, it is drought sensitive. So, seedlings are extremely drought sensitive, because adults are also drought sensitive, frost sensitive. So, we are talking about drought sensitive. So, lot of sunlight, if it is there, scorching happens, and drought cannot be, Tectona grandis seedlings do not tolerate drought as well. So, that's the thing. The question is about light conditions. That's why it should be drought, not frost. Okay. This is not frost. This is okay. This is a drought. Fine. Okay. Other than that, yes, this is another species, Dapterocarpus turbinatus. It requires shade in the initial stage and later they become light demanding, much like Tectona grandis, you can say. Fine. But yes, these species, if you know, then good. But I don't know if it is return on interest is not that high if you really do all kinds of research on one species. See, these are the 15 markers question, and you can see that these questions are really direct questions. There is not many tricks. There are just multiple questions clubbed into one. So as you know, this section contains mangroves and cold desert as part of the syllabus, and there will be at least 1 to 2 questions every year, 15 marker. So you should be doing it very well, because it really is free marks if you think about it. It's really simple, a really short topic. It can be done within hours if you study properly, and the question is very direct. You see, what is the ecological significance of cold deserts? One question. How do plants adapt and survive to this cold and harsh condition? Second question. And provide list of common native species of the desert. 3 questions, 15 marks. You can assume 5 marks for each question, right? So even if you write 2 out of 3 is very good. So 10 mark you can get very easily. Because see, the first part here, ecological significance, there are not lot of points here. But okay, let's see the intro. Intro is nothing. Intro is same. What is cold desert and its distribution? Here you can draw a map, because this is 15 markers. You will be having 4 pages with you to write. So you can, or rather you must draw the map. You show properly labeled diagram to the examiner. This I know where these cold deserts are there in India. No need to go beyond India. So what are the cold deserts? Yes, these are arid regions, very cold regions. Precipitation is very low, and all that. You can even enlist site factors if you want. So soil, which we have already enlisted in the above. So why afforestation is difficult? That was the question. Some of the site factors you can even mention here, because it's a 15 markers. You have a lot of time. You have a lot of space. You have only 3 questions in to write in 36 minutes. You can take your time. So what would be ecological significance? 1, protects biodiversity. So there are unique plants and unique animal species that are found only in cold deserts and not anywhere else. So that is one important. Second, it's shelter for the wildlife. Yes. And third, you can even write water. So frozen regions can act as water towers of the world. That also you can write. I have not mentioned here. You can add one more point. So okay, so second question, where you have a lot to write. Fine. What are the adaptations? So there are internal adaptations and there are external adaptations. What would these plants adapt for? So these are harsh conditions that is mentioned in this question itself. You can mention those before attempting this part of the question. And what are those harsh conditions? We have already seen in question number 1, 1A as in. So this internal basic problem is plants have a lot of water in them within their cells and cell walls. So when the temperature is very low, this water expands and explodes. That's the basic problem. So how do these plants deal with that water? That is the internal adaptation. So basically they don't have a lot of water. Firstly, low water content in cell wall. Otherwise it freezes, expands and cell bursts. Secondly, high osmotic concentration of cell. So it reduces freezing point of water. So water that is inside the cells do not freeze. That's one thing. Third, high permeability of cell wall to water. So when temperature goes down, water tries to expand, and because cell is permeable, water goes out of the cell walls. Okay, and it does not explode. Cell does not explode. And finally, high concentration of water binding colloids. So water are bound, they do not expand and explode. That is internal adaptation. And external adaptation, another harsh condition, it is water scarcity, because these are deserts. So you will see them, you will see these trees along streams for moisture. You will see leaf shading before winters. That is again another adaptation. So these are some of the adaptations. And final question, we call list of common native species. So yes, this is important because they are asking you native species. So if you write uh, species which are not native or which are exotic species, then those would not be counted for your marking because the question specifically asks for native species. Okay. What are the native species? You have rhododendron, you have Betula utilis. Oh, okay, sorry, I forgot to write them in italics, but you can write them. Okay. So these are the species I have enlisted. Actually, this is not a native species, so you can remove this. This is also not a native. This is also not a native species. Okay. So write native species basically. I have mentioned some species of this cold deserts, but these are exotic species and not native species. And the question specifically asks native species. But you just have to enlist it. Nothing, don't have to describe it. Nothing is required. You just have to enlist 5 species for 5 marks. Okay. Next question. Again, this is the question that will always come to write about phenology and distribution of common species. Those species have specifically been mentioned in our syllabus and they have been discussed in all the standard books like Manikandar and Prabhu, and that is I believe enough to attempt this kind of question. So this is a 15 marker. 2 species are asked for 15 marks. So 7.5 for each species, and out of that you have to write phenology, silviculture characteristic and regeneration method. So 2.5, 2.5, 2.5. See, so you have 3 into 3, 6 questions to attempt for 15 marks. So, if you think about it, it is easy to attempt so many questions because if you write small things or 2, 3, 4 points about one thing, then also you have 4 into 6, 24 points to write about a 15 marker question. So it becomes easy to write this kind of questions, but again you have to be quick. You have to ensure that yes, you don't waste a lot of time, like don't write 20 minutes only one question. That's not appropriate way to score. But the problem with this kind of question is there are a lot of species that are given in our syllabus. So which species are important, which are not, you have to choose. I mean, you can't study all the trees in detail, but study main trees in detail and look for similarities. So if you look at South Indian trees, so their characteristic will be similar to teak. If you look at North Indian trees, their characters will be similar to sal. So like that, you have to be smart about it because you cannot study each and every species. Now, these species were this year they asked Melina arborea and Pinus roxburghi. So one of these is white teak, one of these is cheer. Both are very commonly known simple species because we study about teak so much, or teak is one of the first species we study about. So Melina arborea is nothing different. It is exactly same in terms of phenology and silviculture characteristic and regeneration method. Nothing, I mean, very small differences are there in terms of uses that too. Okay, so now this is a 15 marker question. So you can introduce both the trees in the beginning. So like Melina arborea, white tea, family is Verbinaceae. See, again, here what you show here is that I know things. I am not just somebody who did not study for this examination, and I am not taking this lightly. So if you write a family name, then examiner knows that you know your stuff. So write it. Common name also you can write, or you should write rather, and this name you are already given. Again, make this in italics if you are typing. Underline it when you are writing on the page. It is a medium-sized tree, deciduous tree, having broad-shaped crown and distributed across India. You find white teak from Himalayan foothills to Kerala. Everywhere you can find white teak. It produces useful timber for household implements. So it is like teak only. It's used for its timber. Now phenology, you can say that phenology refers to life cycle of the plant, and it involves when does a leaf fall happen, when does new leaf come, and when does flowering and fruiting happen. So this is factual information. You can get it from any book. In general, fruiting will happen just before moisture. So in terms for white teak, it would be before monsoons. And for species in the snow-clad region, it would be before snowfall, or just before summer, before melting of snowfall rather. Silviculture characteristics, what are they? So basically, if the species is light demand or not, frost sensitive or frost resistant, it is fire sensitive or fire resistant, it is wind firm or not, it is drought hardy or not, what is its copaicing ability, those things. Again, factual information, nothing much to discuss. And silviculture characteristic would be similar to teak, nothing different. Regeneration method, there will always be two kinds of regeneration. There would be natural regeneration and there would be artificial regeneration. And artificial regeneration would happen by sowing and planting. But you can write some important additional points here regarding specific species. So if you want to write about teak, you can talk about seed treatment, so alternate wetting and drying. And in artificial regeneration, stump planting is there. Because this is, you have written good copaicing ability, you can write artificial regeneration by copaicing as well. Okay, so that's it. And then, so 3 questions, 2 and 5 for each. And then come Pinus roxburghi, second species. Then it is a common name cheer, family Coniferaceae. Again, general description as an introduction. A large evergreen tree having orally branching. It is used for furniture making, general carpentry, resin tapping. General uses of this pine, cheer pine rather. Phenology. So again, leaf shading, new leaf, flowering. Factual information available in all books. Silviculture characteristic. Light demander, frost hardy, drought resistant. For frost hardy, it has to be because it is in the Himalayan region. Sensitive to waterlogging, of course, because it mainly have found in Himalayan mountain ranges, so on the slopes. Fire resistance, as it has thick bark. See, because this has a lot of resin, it has to adapt itself to fire sensitiveness. So it is a fire hardy species and it has thick bark, but it has a lot of needles which fall down, and when they get dried, they are highly fire sensitive, and therefore this forest is very much fire prone. And you can see that in our Indian State of Forest report as well. It is one of the hot spot as when it comes to forest fires. It is a wind pollinated species, not susceptible to browsing. General, again, all this information is in the standard books. No other method but to recall it, remember it. You have to, these are very simple questions, 15 marker questions, and nothing really to explain here. And regeneration method, seeds, sowing and planting. Seeds, I mean natural regeneration. This is sowing and planting. Artificial regeneration. Some extra information you can write, since this is 15 markers. Natural regeneration would be better if you provide gap for light. Well-drained soil should be there. Northern aspects of Himalayas. Controlling of grazing. 1 second. Okay. Control on grazing. These are the things to get successful regeneration. And sowing and planting, it should be for monsoon. Okay. Question number 3 of this question. Okay. Elucidate the pattern of failing and mode of regeneration adopted under selection system of management. Okay. Simple question. There are 2 sub questions, 10 marker, so you can get 5 mark for each. So it becomes easier for us to write. Introduction. What would be it? We define what selection system is, where diffused feeling across the forest at all times. It is used where it can be used, that you can mention undulating areas or watersheds or spring sheds or remote inaccessible areas, where there you can use selection system, that you can mention here in the introduction itself. So the first question, pattern of failing. So where and how, that's the question basically. And regeneration, there's not much to write in regeneration, because mostly in selection system we use natural regeneration, because the places where we are using selection system, these are generally inaccessible regions or high slopes, where artificial regeneration is difficult. So that's why, and one of the positives of selection system is that it promotes natural regeneration, and that's why mostly it will be natural regeneration. But sometimes supported natural regeneration can be used. So you can do weeding, you can protect from grazing. That thing you can do in supported natural regeneration, and we can also use artificial regeneration to fill the gaps. So wherever it is not possible for natural regeneration to regenerate quickly, you can use we can use artificial regeneration as well, but it is used very selectively. So in regeneration, there is not much to write. So we have to write more about this thing, and we have to also assume that it is not perhaps 5-5. It is perhaps 7-3, 6-4. But or you can mention this when it is successful, when it is not. That things you can mention if you want to fill the pages, like we did in the earlier question. Okay. So pattern of failing. So first, scattered mature trees are felled to facilitate natural regeneration. Because we want natural regeneration to happen in selection system, this is always the first step. Then what is the pattern? We in ideal selection system, felling operations are carried out in all the areas at all the times in perpetuity, or at least in for very long time. That's what we have written in all areas every year in ideal selection system. But in general, in practice, we divide our selection system area into number of coops, and each coop is chosen to be felled for one every year, and after that we go to next coop, then to next, then to next. So after, let's say, n years, we come back to original first coop. So periodic selection is there. Each coop is worked out for an year. Area is divided into coop. That's what I have mentioned. It is done without interruption over a long period of time. And what kind of forest we get in the selection system? We get irregular forest, and we try for normal forest where all age classes are represented. Then again, pattern of failing. So what is the chronology of failing? So we firstly fell dead, dying, or diseased trees because we don't want other trees to get infected. These are the first. Then you have undesirable species, they are fallen. Then mature trees above DBH, or diameter at breast height. Because in selection system we don't have rotation period per se, we choose a DBH, and above that DBH all trees are felled. So basically this is your distribution, this is your diameter, this is number of trees. So you choose some diameter at breast height, and all trees in this region, they are felled. You can draw this kind of graph to make it clear instead of rotation edge. And we also ensure that there is no canopy interruption over beyond one tree gap. Okay. Regeneration I have already explained, not much to write about it. You can write these things like gap for soil, gap for light, well-drained soil is to be used, and northern aspects. This is for Himalayas, and control on grazing. If that is ensured, then natural selection or natural regeneration is successful. That you can mention. Okay. So let's go to question number 3. Again, a very easy question from silviculture topics. Again, you can see that there are multiple sub questions here. It becomes very easy for us to attempt. Okay, what do you mean by tending operation? So you just have to define. Otherwise, we would have written anyway in definition. But now they are asking what are tending operation. Then enumerate various tending operations. So we don't have to think about it. You just have to enumerate. And since this is a 15 marker, we can explain it in one line what each operation means, and just don't enlist. Okay. We can just explain it one line. That's what I have done. Simple enough. And because we have, I think we had 3 pages for this question. So there was a lot of space to write. No issue. And third question, discuss improvement felling. It is one of the tending operations. So 3 questions, 5 marks each you can assume, or maybe less mark for this. because there is not much to write here. What do you mean by tending operations in definition part? So what are tending operations? These are the operations which are carried out for the benefit of forest crop at any stage of life. Generally, operations which are beneficial for forest growth of tree species, they are tending operations. So benefit of forest crop in terms of growth or yield or uh, regeneration. In that terms, if the operations which are beneficial for forest crop are tending operation, it is kind of training the forest crops. So you can remember like that as well. And so the second part, enumerate. So what are these? These are weeding, simple removal or cutting back of weeds. Explain it in one line, or you can even write types of weeding here. So we are line weeding, you have ring weeding. That also you can mention if you have time and space. Then there are cleaning operation. So we remove dead, dying, diseased. What we do for selection forest, we do here in cleaning operations. Unwanted species, litter, organic matter beyond certain limit, because after certain limit, organic matter becomes home for pests and other insects which may harm our forest crop. So we can't leave too much organic matter lying around, and we remove wolf tree, which again hamper growth of other forest trees. Right. So this is weeding, this is cleaning, thinning operations. Felling made in immature stand for purpose of improving growth and form of trees that remain. So there are different kinds of thinning, but that is not asked in the question. You can mention that in one line. So you have free thinning, you have crab thinning, you have ordinary thinning, mechanical thinning. That you can mention in brackets if you want, if you have time and space. But thinning is basically uh, felling made in immature stand, so that other trees that remain, they should grow in a better way. Next is pruning. Pruning is cutting of branches to obtain cleaner bole. Then you have climber cutting, you have girdling, and you have improvement felling. Don't explain this because we are that is the whole next question that we want to discuss, the improvement felling, right? So what is improvement felling? Improvement felling basically is done in selection type of forest or mixed forest where less valuable species are felled so that more valuable species grow in better way. That's what improvement felling is, generally in mixed or irregular crops. Okay. And what do they include? They include the same thing: removing of dead, diseased, felling of unsellable parts or unsellable over mature trees, unsound badly shaped trees. Then we have thinning of congested areas. If the area is too much congested in, let's say, remote forest, we want to ensure that valuable species that are there, they should grow better. So we cull some of those places so that we get valuable timber. Cutting of damaged seedlings, removal of undesirable undergrowth, climber cutting. These are all operations in improvement felling. See, you may think that only 5-6 points are there, but this is only one part of out of 3. This is one part of the question. 5 points are more than sufficient. You won't have that much time. I know you will have time, but not that much. So again, this is one of the very standard questions. One of the syllabus topic is mangroves and cold desert. It's very short topic, only few pages, and if you can master it, then you will always have 115 markers. Or in this case, you have 2 this year. We had one on cold deserts. Here we have on mangroves. Again, look at the number of questions that are asked. Okay, what are the characteristics and significance of mangrove forests? Not mangrove trees, mangrove forests. Discuss important species formation in mangrove forest. Okay, so 1, 2, 3 questions. Again, 5 each. What can be introduction? Introduction, always we want to define it. So what are mangrove forests? Mangrove forests are those forests grown in salt, those forests having salt tolerant species. They are found in intertidal zones in tropical or subtropical regions. Right. So you can define it like that. If you want, you can give a map where mangroves are found in India. So basically, you can show Sundarbans, you can show Krishna Godavari Delta, you can show Gujarat area. You can show Maharashtra Ratnagiri mangroves, Goa mangroves. These mangroves you can show in the map. Because this is again a 15 marker, lot of space, lot of time. You can do that in few seconds. Now, characteristics of mangrove forest. So basically, we don't just want to write about habitat characteristics. We want to write everything. We want to write about habitat characteristics. We want to write about adaptations of mangrove species, and we want to write about other characteristics as well. So which we have mentioned as miscellaneous characteristics. Okay. So what are the habitat characteristics? What kind of habitat do we get in mangroves? So in terms of climate, in terms of soil, in terms of topography, that's what we have enlisted here. In soil, we don't have any air because this is intertidal zone. The waterlogged soil will be there. So there is no air. So anaerobic bacteria will dominate, which will be denitrifying. So there will be nitrogen deficiency. Then we have oversaturated soil. It will be loose. So we need a lot of support. That's one of the adaptations for plants. Then atmosphere, you have salt spray, continuous seawater is coming. Then we have high humidity, we have disasters, mineral unavailability, NPK deficiency. These are all habitat characteristics. That is one of the things. See, I have written so many points because if you write everything, so characteristics of mangrove forest, if you can write everything, you are covering entire mangrove chapter in those 4 pages in front of examiner, and you're telling that I know this topic exhaustively. So there is no scope for cutting any marks. You can get here full marks as well, like 12, 13, 14, 15, I don't know. But I suspect they give very high marks because every year we are seeing people who have like 150, 160, 170 out of 200. So it's possible to get 15 out of 15. That's what I suspect. And if you can write everything, of course you'll get that. And for mangrove forest, one is habitat characteristics, second is adaptations. Adaptations for what? Adaptations for high salt concentration, adaptations for loose soil, adaptations for reproduction. These are the different kinds of adaptations I have mentioned. So for high salt, we have specific adaptations like exclusion, secretion, accumulation, or thick cuticles. So I mentioned this. So exclusion, there is ultrafiltration mechanism in those. Hypodermis has multiple layers to filter out the salt. Like secretion, so there are special salt glands where even if salt is absorbed, it is secreted back. Then there is accumulation. So whatever salt still remains, the plants have adaptation to accumulate them in specifically designed glands like raphides or cystoliths. So the salt gets accumulated there and does not harm plants as much. Then for salt spray, they have thick cuticle which acts as a barrier, right? Then you have for soil, so root modifications are there. We all know, like stilt roots, pneumatophores, knee roots, buttress roots. These are all there for support or for air that I have mentioned. You can mention in bracket which genera show this kind of adaptations. So Rhizopora have stilt roots, or Avicennia has pneumatophores. Buttress root is seen in Heritaria. Okay, knee root in Brugueria. Reproduction, vivipary. So reproduction, seed germination happens on tree itself because seed cannot germinate on reaching the ground because waterlogging is there, high salt concentration is there. So seed germinates on tree itself. So vivipary can be seen. So what are the miscellaneous characteristics? One is lack of understory, because mangrove forests need lots and lots of sunlight for these extensive adaptations that they have to maintain, the extensive defense mechanisms that they have to maintain. So the understory cannot be there. All these plants needs lot of sunlight. That's the reason for not lack of understory here. And mangrove zonation, that you can draw diagram, that white mangroves, red mangroves, black mangroves, you can show that in the diagram. Significance, what is the significance? See, there is ecological significance, there is economic significance, for disaster management, for soil creation and soil maintenance, then for cultural regions also. You can write many points in each of this. So for ecological significance, you have biodiversity, you have lot of These are the places where carbon is sequestered at very high rate. So 1200 tons of carbon is sequestered per hectare of this forest. So this is habitat for a lot of species. So like that, you can mention a lot of ecological benefits. For economic benefits, so jobs is there, timber is there, blue economy is there, uh, then fruits, and a lot of people depend on these mangroves for their livelihood as well. Fuel, everything. I mean, you can get salt tolerant wood for ship making, etc. That's also there. Disaster management, of course, like tsunami, cyclones, the sea wave energy is dissipated by these mangrove forests. Surges, storm surges, you can see. And cultural reasons, our cultures of people living in the coastal area have evolved with mangroves. So cultural reasons are there. And then we have soil. So soil is trapped. So seawater rising, mangroves act as opposing agent for sea level rising, right? Then important species formation. Here I think we can write three things in particular. We can write about succession because they are asking about species formation. So that would mean succession. Then there is zonation and the important species. All three you can mention. See, this is 15 marker. We had 4 pages. So I wrote all these things. You can just mention species and move on. Maybe that's what they were asking, but I wrote these as well. So succession, you can draw a simple diagram. No need to write lot of things. You can show this in the diagram as well. Succession, mangrove scrub to trees to saltwater heritage area to swamp forest to evergreen forest. You can just write draw one diagram. Similarly, mangrove zonation, red mangroves, white mangroves, black mangroves. You can show that in the diagram as well with pneumatophores in the red mangroves, and then you have stilt roots, then you have knee roots that from away from the coast. So important species, here again I would suggest you mention genera and one species of each genera, so that it gives holistic feeling for the examiner that this person knows about mangroves in detail, and he is just not crammed up species for the sake of it. He knows the genera as well. So there are 6 genera in mainly in India: Rhizophora, Avicennia, Soneraceae, Xylocarpus, Bruguiera, Sterculis. So we can mention Rhizophora mangle, you can mention Avicennia germinans, you can mention Soneraceae alba, Xylocarpus rumpi, you can mention Bruguiera, and Sterculis. You can mention Heritaria here, Heritaria species you can mention, Heritaria littoralis. Here you can mention Bruguiera gymnorrhiza. So yeah, you can write one species for each of these genera and come to the next question. This third question of the question number 3. Now this was asking about grading operations in nurseries and what is the importance of these grading operations. Grading operations of seedlings essential for successful forest plantation. So you can think about this logically as well. What is grading operation? You just have to define. Introduction, you don't have to think. So grading is basically separating into classes as per quality, different degrees of usefulness as per our objectives and requirements. That's the grading operation. In general, that is what grading is. So in nurseries as well, we just classify the seedlings in terms of their quality, in terms of their usefulness. That's what grading is. Why is grading essential? Because it lets us to gauge productivity, choose species as per our requirement. You can gauge how many species would be required, what would be the characteristic. We can choose species for the tree breeding program, we can choose species seedlings for the seed orchard. That's what I've mentioned. These are the things. I mean, we can choose species which may produce high quality timber, or which may sequester more carbon, or whatever our need may be, which may produce more fuel wood, etc. So all these, conclusion we can write, all these are ultimately required to meet the goals and objective of the working plan. See, this is a very good conclusion, because everything in forest operations happens as per working plan, and whatever we are doing, they are one of the objectives of working plan, and we are always working according to that. So this is a very good conclusion for many questions. You can use it as a hack. So All these are ultimately required to meet the goals and objectives of working plan. That's all. Okay, this is again very standard question. You can find this in any book. Like Manikandan has entire page dedicated to exactly this question. I mean, you don't even have to look somewhere else. You don't have to think about any other thing. This is a direct question, and that's the level of difficulty these days of Forest Service mains examination, especially in this section. Because in other section there are some general questions coming. In paper 2 there are some difficult questions coming, but this is one of the few sections where very direct questions are coming from very standard sources. So you can prepare this very well, and if you prepare this very well now, you I I believe one would get very high marks, because earlier toppers have also suggested the same thing, that uh, you should attempt more question from section 1 of paper 1 as well, or section A rather of paper 1 as well and paper 2 as well, because these are the core forestry topics where examiner would be tempted to give you more high marks. This is what toppers have suggested, and since they have very high marks, we can listen to them. Okay, so what are the conditions on which the choice of particular silviculture system to be adapted for the specific species in any locality depend? So this question is about which silviculture system should we choose for particular species at particular locality. Again, very standard question. In introduction, we have to define silviculture system. Silviculture system is basically a planned program of treatments which are given to forest during its whole life cycle, designed to achieve specific stand structural objectives. So they include like procedures by which crops are tended, regenerated, or harvested according to accepted silvicultural principle. This is standard definition of silvicultural system, which you can write. Again, if you have mugged it up, it would become very easy for you to write in the examination hall, and you can be sure that there will be question on silviculture system for sure. This is the entire chapter of section A. So I would suggest just mug up this definition and write it without thinking when the question is about silviculture systems. So choice of silvicultural system as per site condition crucial for success of forestry program. So a connecting line I am writing. So what are these factors? Suitability of species. So if there is light demander species, we go for clear felling. If it is a shade demander or shade bearer, we have to go for shelter wood or selection system. If it is a good copicer, we go for coppice system. If it is a good seed producer, we go for high forest system. If it has a long seed interval, we go for a selection system. Simple things. Then topography and soil. If the undulating topography is there, if there is hill slopes, then we have to go for selection system, or liable for erosion. If the watershed, spring sheds, then we have to go for selection or Indian irregular systems. If soil is in evergreen forest, we have to go for Indian irregular system like in Andaman and Nicobar. Then objectives of management. If you want production of fuel wood or small size timber, we go for coppice systems. If you want large size timbers, we go for high forest systems. Then economic consideration. So this is very standard, and you can find this in any standard book. In Manikandan Prabhu, it's discussed in very detail, and nothing for me to discuss per se. Unique, there is nothing unique. Economic consideration might be there, availability of skilled staff and labor, existence of right. If there is, if there are people living in the area around, then we want to open up that area as quickly as possible. So clear felling has to be done. Selection cannot be done in such areas. Okay, so if there are aesthetic consideration, we have to go for selection system. If labor scarcity is there, then we go for Tonga system. If we have adequately skilled staff but less number of labor, we go for selection system. But if it is opposite, if we have a lot of labor but skilled staff is not there, then we go for clear felling system, because that requires very less skill. See, very standard question, 15 marker. This again free marks I would say, but when it comes to choice of questions, you have to also consider which combination of questions you are comfortable with, and that according to that you have to choose. For example, this question: elucidate distribution, nursery techniques and economic importance of these three species. So 3 species, 5 marks for each species, and for each species 3 sub questions are there. So this is a huge question if you write a lot. And the issue is this nursery techniques part is not there in standard books, especially in Manikandan and Prabhu. It's not there. So and the question is asking for 3 species. If you write the same nursery techniques, you would not get marks of that part at least. So if you know some specific nursery techniques about these species, at least 1-2 specific points, and then you can write general points, that is fine. But if you don't know any specific points, then and write general nursery techniques in all the species, then I don't think you will be getting many marks. So this is a difficult question in that respect to attempt. But distribution very easy, and economic importance very easy. And since there are 3 species asked, no space for introduction, just write in tabular form, I would say. Here I have mentioned in tabular form, you can write it separately as well. You will get 3 to 4 pages. So 1 page for each species, you can definitely write. So distribution. See, I have mentioned it. I have mentioned some nursery techniques as well. But again, I had to search for it. So they are not readily mentioned. But if you know some things, then good. So basically, nursery should be located on the northern aspect. Soil should be mixed with leaf mold, and sowing just before snow falls in the drills. And the twigs should be placed over the drills to protect from browsing or birds. Then weeding operation and planting out in 3rd and 4th year, etc. But in general, these are the nursery techniques which we study. These are available in all the books, and so these are the nursery technique basically: seed collection, seed treatment, preparation of nursery beds. So size, you can generally see that 1 into 10 is the general size. You can mention that. Then soil mixture, so porous and fertile soil is mixed. FYM is used, vermicompost is used, then mycorrhiza is used. That insecticide, fungicide, mulching by straw. These are general points you can mention, and you wouldn't be wrong. But since we have 3 species in the question, and if you don't know any specific points about any of the species, then it becomes difficult to get more marks here. You will get general marks only, because this is not a wrong thing. Seed sowing, transplanting, watering, this is right. I mean, of course, we will have to do everything for each one of these for each of the species. But I believe they are looking for something specific in terms of each of these species. But these 2 questions are very easy: distribution and economic importance, that you can write for all the 3 species. Again, you see, we had 2 species that were there in the second question number 2, and here in question number 4 you have 3 different species. So there is a limit to how many species can you prepare. So be smart about it. Try to go through previous year questions paper, see if there are any repetitions, which species are getting asked again and again, which species are not that important, and study accordingly. Okay. But again, these are important species. These species we study very often. So Cedrus deodara, Acacia catechu, these are very important species anyway, and Casuarina as well. So economic importance I have mentioned here. Nothing much to discuss. You can go through it, take a screenshot if you want. But a screenshot you can take of this as well. Then question number 3: how are forest sites classified on basis of vegetation? Standard question, not much to explain here, but I just wanted to tell you that main question is about champion and sets classification only, but there are other ways to classify as well based on vegetation. So basically, for example, is vegetation pure or mixed? Is vegetation even-aged or uneven-aged? Is vegetation regenerated using seeds or coppice? So these are also classifications based on vegetation only, but the question mainly I believe is asking about champion and set classification, which anyway you will have to mug up. You can write it like this, or you can draw a tree diagram. That is also one of the ways you can quickly write about this and move ahead. This is anywhere 10 marker, you will get 2 pages. On first page you can write this, on second page you can just draw a tree diagram and be done with it. But see, in that much space, drawing a tree diagram is actually not the most efficient thing to do. So this, I believe, is better way. Here you can even write this as group 1, group 2. That also looks good. So looks like a good thing to read, formal thing to read, rather than a tree diagram, which you'll have to cram in that low space. Okay, and write entire name. So tropical, wet, evergreen forest. Write entire thing. Don't write it in short or anything. Okay, and the order of groups is also important. Write in this order as well. You will have to mug this up. I have mentioned it. You can find this in any of the standard books. Okay. Thank you. We'll discuss part B in the next lecture.